Okay, Miguel, welcome to EMKAN Podcast. Everybody, I have Miguel. He's CEO of Forward Thinking, right? Miguel is Forward?
It's a fast forward. Fast forward thinking, yeah.
It's a long-standing consultancy firm, specifically focusing on strategic foresight. I will be posting more of the links and background information about Miguel, his work, and his company in the description for this episode. But let me start, Miguel. Miguel, what is your real motive behind working in futures foresight or strategic foresight? I know it's like a good business, but what really motives you?
I'm not pretty sure it's a good business. It's still a niche. And not so many people is using it. And I started with Foresight like in 2014. It was actually late 2013, almost 7 years ago. And in that moment in time, I had two companies. Fast Forward, which is the company I have now. It's the longest one. It's been 6 years. Actually, it's 6 years old next Tuesday. So that is it's a good thing. Thank you. But I came to Foresight and understanding the future because previously I was working with design thinking. Before that, I was working in technology with development, and when you start to see what technology is able to do to humanity, how technology is pushing the boundaries forward, you start to understand not only what you are doing right now, but what the impact is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. But at the same time, when working in technology, I was realizing that most of the people that use technology were thinking in the short term, delivering projects for smaller things, when technology is a major driving force to change a lot of things. And I started to read a lot of things about how to do things for the longer term. And I came around a few books around 2008 or 9, something like that. It was before the economic crisis. And I came around some of the original books on the futures studies, the volume 1 and volume 2. And it started to trigger something in my head on how you can use things of the longer term, imaginations and visions of things that are not yet happening to influence the things that you are doing today. And then the economic crisis came in, and it was like, oh, wow, we need to start thinking in the longer term because the shorter term is broken. So how are we going to move over there? And basically my goal, I started to read a lot. I mixed that with the technology and design thinking things, and part of my studies in sociology, and it all makes sense. It connected, everything connected together. And I started to talk to people about that, and I discovered that most of the leadership message in big or small companies, in governments or private sector, they were thinking also in the short term, even when the speech was about the longer term. So I thought at that moment in time that it was probably my knowledge about the field that was limited. So, or maybe it was the language I was using to the CEOs or the boardroom or the VPs or something. And I decided to do some executive education and MBAs in there, just to understand the language of the corporations from the inner side, and see if it was a kind of a language. And I was proposing something that was already there. And when I complete the MBA, I discovered that basically there was no one thinking about the future. And it's like, why not? Because the future is like our only legacy. It's the only legacy that we are going to leave there. It doesn't matter if it's our children or anyone else's children. It's the only thing that we are living. But it seemed that no one was thinking on that, but a few people are around the world. And there was a lot of academic stuff, but not so many actionable, tangible things that people can actually use in their day-to-day. So that is a little bit on how I came here. And then we evolved it a lot in the last 7 years. So that happened very fast in the last 7 years.
Oh, amazing to hear that, and I think this is like a common theme from between all the guests, that everyone has his own like story and like his background, and this as well as some of the guests were from like social studies, someone like you from technology perspective, some from business, journalism, etc. But it makes sense that like future studies and strategic foresight is like. It's about us, it's about the humanity, it's about, you know, making the future now. And I think that's the beauty of the field, and maybe this is one of my motives, that that to take that sense of agency, you know, about the future, and that you can shape the future. Let me go back one step, Miguel. In your opinion, what are like, is there any prerequisite for someone to be a futurist? Like a certain mindset, a certain criteria to. Is it for
well,
all, like?
I think you can get very academic in here, or you can get very practical. Okay, so from the academic point of view, as everyone will try to say in any single profession that you can do in this world, you need to get trained, you need to practice, then you go from junior to senior and do all those things. And that might be true. Experience is making you better in understanding things and doing things, whatever you practice. Obviously, I believe that is going to be most important for some professions rather than others. I wouldn't let a doctor that learned on his own to go on a surgery room with me, but you need some formal education. But when we are talking about the future, about the foresight, my thinking, and this is the most practical way of it, is like everyone is a futurist. Sometimes we do it intentionally. We know what we are actually doing and making decisions. Like, for example, when you choose a degree that you want to study. Okay, so that is a long-term decision that is going to be affecting your life. It is good, it's practical, everyone knows how to do it. The point is that most people do that not in an active way. They are not aware that on what they are actually doing. They do it because some social constraints. Yeah, it's the intentionality. But you have to think on this image of the human beings and animals and living forms in the planet. They all anticipate things. Anticipation is what is coming before the future. So you need to anticipate possible outcomes so you can prepare for those. We've been doing that like harvesting. We need to prepare for the next harvest. And if the winter has been bad, then the harvest is going to be wrong. So we prepare to do that. Or during the summer, we keep more food because we anticipate that something is going to happen. The weather is very easy. The planet is very easy. So anticipations in there has been always with the humankind. But what we are doing right now is using that sense, that tools, that inner ways of anticipating things as biological things to shape the world rather than to be reactive. And that is a good thing. It's like everyone can do it. You need a little bit of practice. And the most important thing to me is that you need to be pretty open-minded. If you are just focused on your expertise, if you are a lawyer, or if you are a programmer, or if you are a designer, and you think that the future is going to be just about your knowledge, maybe you are starting with the wrong foot. You need to be open because the future is much more diverse, much more open, much more collective as it is being now with all this pandemic, but it's much more broader than just yourself. Sorry. So
I think it's about this. This is an interesting point. Like, you know, to have an open mind approach is also to be open to challenge your own assumptions, right? And the way what is your like, what are your worldviews? What do you think like the world should be or should not be? I think this is like in a sense also important for to do any like futures related work.
Yeah, and look at the assumptions. Most of them have made you what you are today. So all the decisions that you made in the past, when you look now backwards, they all make sense. They look like a perfect line that is taking you through a path and very good decisions at the right moment to make you who you are. But now go back and remember when you were trying to make those decisions, you had no single clue about what you were doing. Right. Now that is the sense of when you are challenging your assumptions today, you have to let go some things that you decided on the past. And that might make yourself crumble a little bit. It's like, okay, imagine that I'm gonna find an example here, a simple one. Imagine that you've been a vegetarian all your life, and suddenly you decide to eat meat, which is the opposite of the trend that we have right now. Okay, so I did that in purpose. Now, when you make that decision, you are challenging every decision you made in the past about you being vegetarian. So that happens because sometimes when we are growing up and we make decisions about what we want to do, what we are studying, how we want to set up a family, what country do we want to live in, at some point in time, you have to challenge something. And most people do not dare to do that because that is going to question all the previous decisions in that life. And that is what you need to do, is be open and challenge that maybe you were not right, or maybe you didn't have all the knowledge at that moment in time, and say, okay, I was very, let's say, non-literate at that moment in this topic. So what I need to do is evolve. I'm going to continue evolving. And probably if everything works as it's been working until now, from the future, I look back, it will make sense, this decision.
Right, right. I read just 2 points here. I read like one article that it's back that everyone is like a futurist in a sense, that an average human being is like thinking about the future with us, like after 5 or 1 day or whatever period, and like every 15 minutes. So I think this is in our DNA, like to think about the future, right? To worry about the future. The other thing is like why it's hard for us, whether it's like at individual or like corporate levels, to think about the future. It has some like psychological aspect to it, because there is a perception on an individual level that this guy in the future with like Mudaffar after like 10 years is like a stranger to me, you know? So I'm not willing to invest and put any kind of resources, time and effort to make Mudaffar and after 10 years is like a better person. So this is like a psychological person. I can relate it to what are you describing here, Miguel, is to have an open-minded approach and to challenge like your assumptions, and you know, to have, I think it needs some kind of overcoming your fear, and you know, just have this kind of leap of faith, you know, challenge your business as usual and move forward.
And even it's about the starting points. When you are thinking, it's not only the future, you know that there is a thin line that is taking you from the present to the future. You don't know where the future is going to be exactly. You can have some ideas and roughly say it's going to be over this area over here, so we are going to be more or less like this in terms of different aspects, economic, political, social, etc. But you cannot predict it. You can guess where it seems to be going, but one of the things that people never question is, where are you starting from? Is your current position the right starting point? Because there are many different starting points. And that is the present, is how are we going to challenge only the future if we don't challenge the present? Okay. We need to challenge, is it okay for us to start assuming that we have the right position to start something? Or what if instead of being this person, I am a complete different person now? Why don't I put myself in the shoes of others and start building the future from there? So we always tend to do, being a human, well, I only talk here from my expertise and experience as a human, not everyone's experience, okay? So being a human is always, it made me think a lot on what I want to do for myself. Sometimes you find alliances and you do things together. Sometimes those alliances are huge and you have a whole nation doing something. And we tend to group as humans to do things that are bigger than individuals. Yeah. But most of the times, even in those things, we keep thinking about us. So, yeah. Okay, so what is Miguel or what is Modafar going to be after we as a group finish this? So we always have that kind of selfish, in quote, perspective to the future, mostly, as you said, to the shorter term. So we don't care so much about that us in the longer term future. It's a little bit shorter, but we invest a lot in doing things together. Okay, so you are getting this broader community of people, but even at that moment in time, we never change our position in the present. We try to change the position in the future. So that is one of the interesting things that we are trying to solve. For example, with some of our customers, is like, okay, but assume that what you have today is not there. You are not here. You don't have a power position. You are not the leading company or the leading country in whatever. And that is really difficult because everyone is assuming that they are what they are.
Yeah.
And that is at the same time minimizing what everyone else is. And you need everyone because everyone is going to be part of the future that you are building.
Right.
So you need this collective view at the very beginning that is going to be helping. So probably there is that issue you said with the psychological. I remember one book, I can't remember the author, that is called The Selfish Gene.
Okay.
And it's from the 70s. And he was arguing that the issue with humankind is that we believe we are something bigger than anything else, but actually it seems that we are a machine carrying genes only. So what is actually living forever is the genes, not us. So the genes are telling the machine, which seems to be us humans, as individuals, to be selfish to protect them. Okay. So that it's like an interesting approach. So the book was pretty nice to read because it's telling that we are pretty collective, broad, and open when we are talking about something that is really big. But if we are given the decision to share our food and there is no more food, we will never do it. Okay. And then you don't change the empathy. So that was an interesting view because it's talking a lot about all this type of future, the different visions, and how we are trying to make all of them come together to one place and start creating one collective future rather than multiple futures at the same time.
So very interesting point here, Miguel. I think this challenge, whenever like you are working with any group or company, they start like thinking about the future. I think this is like a major challenge to convince them that you need to think about different reality than the present. What are like other challenges you are facing, like other main challenges you are facing with individuals, with corporates, with CEOs, maybe when you are working, and to get them like on board, to get them to think in the longer term, not an operation and the shorter term?
That is a really good one because we've been dealing with this issue for the last, I would say in the Foresight community for the last 50, 60 years. Yeah. And personally, we've been dealing with it since the beginning of the company and started the practice. And the major issue is the return on investment. Everyone is focused on the return of investment. I'm gonna put some resources in here. You can say human, money, assets, whatever. And what is going to be the output? Yeah. What am I getting in return of that? So you have to go and see
something tangible, something that touch.
It's a tangibility. Yeah. And what are we actually selling to people? And when I say selling, it's not about the
service itself,
transaction, not the service itself, but when you are talking about the future, what are you trying to sell to people? You try to sell them an image and a story of a place that is going to be better.
Yeah.
That is going to probably, because you don't have any proof of that, yield better results than today. And then you have to convince the CEO of a company that has been going through MBAs at Oxford, Harvard, or the MIT Sloan Business School, and you go there, and they never heard of something intangible that you should be investing in. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, so you're telling me that we're going to put this amount of resources in here, and you are going to give us a story, and that story might change the way we do things in the future. Right. Say, yes, well, that is a pretty nice summary, but yes, probably you're right. Say, okay, no, we are not investing in this. We need something. We need the future to be created in the next 3 months. Say, okay, so we can create things, but you need to define a longer term vision and do this and say, we have a vision. Our vision as a company is blah, 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 blah. Right. Say, yeah, that is great, but what are the driving factors that are driving your business? What are the major issues that could be affecting you? How are you more resilient by doing what you do? So we don't need to be resilient. We have all the money. We are the leading company in sector X, and this is what it is going to be. We just need to launch a new product. Okay. Say, well, so that is the major issue, is convincing the executive board that they are investing in something intangible that is going to provide them with a more resilient company when both the future and resiliency are intangible. How you make all that things tangible? How you turn the abstractness of the future into something that they can feel and live today. Otherwise, it becomes a Netflix movie. We sell a story, it's like a Netflix show, and then it's like, okay, I've seen that chapter, the episode is nice, it's okay, nice, very beautiful. Now, what do I do today? Right. So that is the major issue, probably, is the return on investment and convincing someone on the intangibility of the future.
So Miguel, what's your trick to tackle this? If you can share, if it's not like a business secret or something.
Okay, we have some experience together, Malafar, and you know that is extremely difficult. Yeah. Now, what we try to do is go in baby steps. There is one thing that most of the times you need to change, and it's the mindset. You need to create a culture of people that is thinking about what might happen, what if. If you have that culture, they are in a position where they can take risks, they can take challenges, and they can make that at small scale or at a bigger scale. So it doesn't matter the scale. The point is that the more people you have in your organization that is able to question and think on the what if, what might, what will, something like that, the better your company is going to be applying Foresight. But then you need to go very slowly implementing things. Like, how can you anticipate something that might happen in the future when you are not scanning properly all the possible views of the world? You are scanning your perception. And we try to avoid that at the very beginning, and we do that very hard in the sense that, okay, imagine you are a water company and you need to start selling water to people, okay? Yeah. And that is pretty easy. We have that in every city. There is a company in charge of water and all that. But now you are so used to your company that you know all the inner workings of the company. So what we do is we replace the service, the product, for something that doesn't make sense. Like, for example, we are going to be a company that is selling you fresh air to breathe. And now let's rethink, how can we still be the company you are, but thinking with a different product that you are not used to it. So you will start to see challenges on how to sell something so common as air to people, when indeed water is pretty common too. But you are used because it's part of your business, so it's not allowing you to go beyond your thinking. And you think in terms of your company, your projects, your tasks, and everything. You change the position, and everyone starts to see the problems. that then you can also start to use for doing a proper scanning process and look for signals and what everyone else is doing, and even correlate to different types of businesses that probably before that you were only thinking in terms of your company, product, and service. So we try to do that at the very beginning, break the assumption of you being what you are, and then we continue the process into understanding the different steps with a thing that is closely related, but kind of absurd at that moment. It's like selling air rather than water. Will you pay for air and breathe? Will you pay for the sun, for example? That is where you start to challenge your service, and you need to think.
Very challenging to the business as usual like perspective. I think this is like important, and you mentioned, Miguel, the culture part, that you need to create this culture of now challenging your assumptions and looking into like different realities, etc. But what is like the role of the current culture? Like, for example, the culture of a corporate is different than the culture of like a government entity. Culture and the socio-economic perspective from the Western world is different than Middle East, different than Asian countries. How you can like identify those differences and make use of it when you are like practicing futures foresight? If you can give us like some of your practical or experience examples, that would be great.
Yes, and you know that I've been working in Asia, Middle East, and Europe, so I have to deal with many different cultures. So that it's interesting. I'm happy to be from South Europe, so our culture is very relaxed. Also, it's not as strict as Northern Europeans, but one of the things I learned during this time is that there are basically two types of approaching time. You have people that societies, because it's not just a matter of individuals, but societies that use time as an asset. So it's something that you can sell, trade, schedule, arrange. So basically these type of societies are monochronic. They use time in a single way. They do one thing at a time. They are very precise, and time is very precise. If we start at 9, it's 9, not 9:05. So the time is an asset, it's a resource, and you use it like that. You don't waste it. And in that context, for example, you have most of the North European countries like Germany, the UK, also most of Canada and the US. And they do one thing at a time. And there are these stories. If you have any friend on Northern Europe, I remember visiting Copenhagen one day just because I was stuck in the airport, and say, okay, so I'm going to spend here a couple of days, and I do a couple of visits. I called one friend in Copenhagen, and I said, no, my plan is to stay home today. Say, well, okay, but is there, you're staying home for some reason? Say, no, but I planned this 2 months ago, so today is my home time, so we cannot go and have dinner. I said, yeah, but I mean, if there's nothing you're going to do at home, say, well, but I was staying, I can visit you at home. And say, no, because this is my alone time at home, and I scheduled for this. Wow. So it's like an extreme on how that time was scheduled, arranged, and the mindset working behind it. And that is an extreme. It's not a generalization of people. But then you go to the other type of cultures where you have most African, Middle East, Southern Europe, Asian cultures, and also Latin America. Indeed, most of the world is polychronic. They use time in a different way. Time gives you the context where relationships happen. Okay. So the important thing is not time, is the connections we are going to have in that period of time. So that is the reason why, for example, in Spain, we are famous for being late all the time. So we say that it's going to be 9, yes, we start at 10. And say, well, time is not that important. Say, someone is, you stay with one friends that you are going to have dinner today, and they call you at 9, say, hey, where are you? We had dinner today at 9, and say, yeah, okay. So no, I'm just arriving, and you're still dressing up at home. So basically,
same as here.
Yeah, but I mean, we are pretty much Arabic. We've been Arab for like 800, 900 years. So our culture is pretty mixed with many different things. We've also been German, indeed, in Spain. So basically, we have all the German kings before the Arabs, then we have our own king. So there's a mix of cultures that it's interesting to see. But the real point here is that you need to understand how time is used. And that time, for example, in the sense of different cultures, is what is making the culture itself. We are trying in the business world, we are trying for everyone to be monochronic. They use the scheduled time, they do things, and at just one precise moment, and the output it's going to be something, because we need to understand that the investment in a certain amount of time is going to produce a certain amount of things. Okay. And then when we go into monochronic things, probably most of your work happens out of the office. Right. You are not there. You are going somewhere, you have relationship, and you involve many people in the same context just to make things happen. But simultaneously, you are doing many different things at a time. So that is one of the most interesting things when you are thinking about time, because if that is the use you make of time, the output, which is the future, is going to be different too. So you don't expect the future to be fixed, something that you can plan ahead, and you can be a little bit more open to let the future grow more in a more adaptive or agile way, rather than, okay, we're going to plan for the future in the next 50 years. So we have a vision on what we are going to be in 200 or 2100, for example. Yeah. Yes, we can have that vision. Still, we have 80 years and things might change in there. So there are two different approaches in there, and the culture is very important. And I learned many things from working in Asia and Middle East on how to apply things differently in Europe, and also the opposite, how to apply some things from Europe in Asia and Middle East. And we're having like a point in the middle. It's not being so precise, not being so relaxed, having some point of
balancing both.
Balancing in between both, because obviously you have to deliver things, and that happens everywhere in the world. So when you are working with companies, they expect you to deliver things. They are meetings, there are presentations, there are projects, and you need to comply with that. But the way you get that culture part of the future is about imagining them, not a global future. The global future is probably very different to a specific local and cultural futures. And we are sometimes pushed for the global future, for that vision of everything is going to be technological, and technology is going to be doing everything coming from Silicon Valley. And we discard other visions of the world that are pretty interesting too.
Yes. Very interesting points, and I love the differentiation you post between the monochronic and the polychronic and how it's related to different cultures. I think it's adding value if you think in this way, and it makes you like understand, okay, now if the meeting starts at 9:30 instead of 9, but we did not waste those 30 minutes, like it's like, you know, all of this side chats, and, you know, it's building this connections with others. And this is how business is being like made in the Middle East, in Asia, Africa, I guess. So if we like now dig deep a layer down, Miguel, and let's assume that we are in the Middle East working. Is there any difference between working with the private sector and public sector within the same culture? Or it's like...
Just in the Middle East?
Anyway, just I'm giving an example.
Yes. I mean, the private sector and the public sector is completely different. I mean, the private sector is driven by the return on investment, the shareholders, the quarters, the returns, and then the public sector is driven by politics. Okay. And I'm not sure what is better or what is worse, and both of them are needed, but the incentives are completely different. I'm gonna talking here from my perspective in my country, for example, in Spain. The incentives of a politician to create a better future are in the short term, because every year, every 4 years, you have to elect a new one. So they are going to do things in the short term to get re-elected.
Okay.
How are you going to plan something for 20 or 50 years?
Yeah.
You need consensus. You need a huge amount of the different political parties to agree on something that is going to be beyond the current party that is ruling.
Mm.
But if you think of that, of the different approach to time, the incentive for politicians or the public sector is getting re-elected. Yeah. But if you go in the private sector, most of the CEOs and most of the VPs and that, they also tend to stay something like 4 years. So maybe less in some cases. So they apply like the same knowledge. It's like, okay, I know that I'm going to be in this company, leading this company for the next 4 or 5 years. So I want to leave my imprint in here. I want everyone to know that this is what I did. Okay. So you stop thinking also on the long term.
Yeah.
And that is something that even when you think that the private sector is more interested into doing things and investing in things and changing the future to be more sustainable or to be more profitable, better for them as an individual. You see that even the people leading that is also there for short periods of time. So it's the same as in the other side, and that is making difficult for everyone to have longer term visions. Although we have them, but at the same point, I believe that it's easier for the public sector to influence the outcome in the long term. Okay. Because you can create regulations, you can create policies that are shifting things towards one place. Just look at the pandemic. We were able to create policies in a matter of weeks to stop everyone from moving around the world. The world has never been so stopped.
Right. Never, right?
So we did that in a matter of weeks. So you have the power of influencing things in the long term by policies. And some of the things that are interesting is that when we did that last year, we were able to see a huge improvement in the way nature recovered itself from human actions. It happened in a matter of a few months. Everything was greener. The air was cleaner, the water was cleaner, everything. And it was just a policy. Suddenly we started to move again and we went back to normal, in quotes again. But the policy had an impact, very, very profound impact on the outcomes. And the governments, the public sector has the possibility to do that and affect the longer term. Mm-hmm. While the private sector, at the same time, they don't have the possibility to change regulation or policies or influence the overall aspect of society, but they have the power to push for things faster than the public sector is capable of. So I believe that even though they are two different approaches of how to influence the future, they need each other to complement how things are going to happen. I think the private sector is able to do things faster because there is probably an economic interest or profit interest in there. And the public sector is able to create the context for the rest of us to start working in a certain way. Right. So both of them are needed. I believe they are needed. Probably now we are in sync, not in sync. I mean, we are not synchronizing how we connect the public with the private. Mm-hmm. And maybe there is a need to do that. And some countries are better in syncing the two sectors than others. But probably we need to sync that a lot more and see more interaction in between them.
Yeah. Actually, this is like an also interesting. You mentioned like getting back to normal. And I wonder now, do we want to get back to normal? Is that was the perfect state? The post-pandemic, we are facing economic crisis. We're facing climate change aspects. health in general was not pretty good. But I think, yeah, it's needed, and I love the way you described it, and that the government sets the patterns of the systems or like the longer term affecting approaches to shape the future, and the private sector and try to make that happen on fast-paced approach or something like this. So my last two questions, Miguel, before we wrap up. The first question, I want your advice for someone who's like just starting in future thinking and strategic foresight. What is your advice for him, for her, where to get knowledge from, what is the best approach to, or let's say, what are the mistakes you made during when you just started, and what's your advice for people to avoid it?
Well, the first mistake is assuming that you know what you're doing.
Okay.
That was my first mistake. I read a lot, and I read a lot of theory, a lot of things. I started to design the services that we wanted to see. We have experience with many different companies. We saw what they were missing, and you start to create things, and suddenly you discover that maybe your service could be improved. And that implies, as we said at the beginning, challenge your assumption and change yourself and that. So one of my first advice is just not to make it open. Find people around everywhere that has different points of view. Get a key reference in every different region that is talking about how they see the future from that region. Try to cultivate that open-minded thing, and think of it as it's a biological thing. And in this context, for example, you know Riel Miller from the UNESCO. They have a very interesting book that was published in 2018, 2017. I can't remember the date. That is Transforming the 21st Century. That is talking about the ways of anticipation, how we are able to anticipate, and what we are doing with the future is building anticipatory systems. Yeah. Foresight is one thing, future shaping is one thing, future foresight is one thing, it's very specific, but forecasting is also anticipating some kind of future. So you need to understand the different ways of anticipating things to be able to discover where is your better fit. So that book is a very nice introduction on anticipatory system, and I think it's available for free for download in the UNESCO website, and that is giving you the concept, the basics of anticipatory systems from the biological perspective, and how we are making things in two ways, no? Anticipating for future or anticipating for emergency. So that is it's like probably one of the best things that you can read at the beginning, so you will stop thinking about a process, a framework, a trend report, a scenario, and going into the tools. Before having a hammer to build a house, you need to understand why humans need shelter. Yeah. Not houses, shelter. We also have caves, and we don't need hammers for that. So you before going into the tools, understand the concept before on why we need anticipation, and then we can start to apply different methodologies, tools, and frameworks to it.
Excellent point, Miguel. And I think I see this like here in the region, and from my interactions abroad, that people tend to jump to tools and creating framework and the practical side of it without understanding like why we are doing this, why it's important. What are the expectations? What are we going to have out of this exercise? So I think this is a very good advice, not only for new joiners or for like someone who started, for all of us. Yeah.
And it connects with the thing that we've been talking about, the culture of the company, the organization, or the society, how leadership is approaching the future. And what are the expectations? Is it tangible or non-tangible? Is it short-term or long-term? It all helps to define there. But if we just rush to tools, we are expecting to have a house with a hammer. So if it doesn't resemble a house, then we're going to have an issue in very, very soon. Okay, so that is the most important thing, is creating that knowledge of anticipatory system before you rush into using tools, methods, and frameworks, because most people, what they are actually doing is rushing into the framework thing rather than understanding and changing the culture on how we think about the future.
And I think when you refer to Rael's book, and I think he spoke about, there's like an ontological question: can we like think about the future, or is the future something that we can think or can anticipate or not? I think this is like a very good starting point, actually, because most often you hear people, okay, tell me what will happen after 5-10 years. So sorry, it's like I'm not predicting the future, right? So this is like also the mindset or what you are mentioning here.
Yeah.
Great, Miguel. My last question, and I enjoyed the conversation a lot. From your perspective, what is the most important capability that an organization, whether private or public sector, should have in order to have an effective strategic foresight or future thinking function or like project within?
I think I will go back to the same conversation. Is accept that the future is non-tangible. So how are you going to measure the output of that unit, the foresight function in any organization? How are you going to measure that? We are trying to measure something that is intangible with very precise and tangible KPIs. And that might be the issue, is making you better at foresight to have trained people into a training course to understand the future. Right. No, you have people that has been trained, obviously, but that is not making you better at foresight. And here I want to use another example. It's like all of us, most of the people in the world are able to walk. We walk.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the capability of walking. Even we have the capability of running. Okay, but we are not able to run a marathon.
Okay.
Just because we measure, okay, how many people do we have in the world that have been trained in walking? We have almost 100% of the people. Okay, how many have been trained in running? Okay, a little bit less, 90%. Okay, perfect. So we have a 90% level achieved on the KPI of being able to run a marathon. Is that no, actually they only know how to run. They don't know how to apply it on the other side. They need to train, they need to practice, they need to fail, they need to do a lot of things. So just by training people in doing something is not making you proficient. Yeah. It's making you someone that knows a little bit more, but you need practice. And the KPIs should probably be reframed somehow. But even the concept of the KPI is very weird in the future. How are you going to measure if the future is successful?
Yeah.
It's that is probably the major issue in here. Is they try to measure it. They try to do that probably because they need to decide if they are going to invest in that concept the next year. But the KPIs being used, the metrics, the measurements, are not, you cannot apply them to something that is non-tangible.
Right.
We expect tangible results, measure tangible results, but we are working with a non-tangible thing. So that is different. How you measure the culture, how you have a metric on how future-proof my culture is.
Okay.
It's pretty intangible.
Yeah.
So that is probably the major thing that needs to change in companies. Understanding that sometimes it's a lab, like the research and development lab. You put it there, you give resources, and sometimes it will produce beautiful things, but most of the times
it will not.
It will be just creating knowledge that will trigger something after that, but you never know when or what.
Yeah. Actually, this is also very important that you are like coming back to the culture part, which is like, and the mindset, and this is like very, very important, and I see it from my work and experience here, as this is actually the most critical aspect, to have this culture, this mindset. And as you said, it's like it's hard to put like a KPI for what we are doing. It's like we are speaking about 5-10 years down the road, and we are not claiming even that this is something gonna happen, or we are not predicting that. So I think the first task, or the most important task for any future thinking or futurists, is to try to work on the culture, to change the mindset, and to make sure that we speak the same language in a sense. Thank you, Miguel. I would like to, if you have any final words, final advice you want to send to our audience, please, you have the floor.
No, so Modafar, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a long time since we saw each other, so I hope I can travel again to Dubai soon, and we can go and have a dinner. And the last thing is easy. The future is out there. We just need to open our mind and search for it.
Yeah, brilliantly said, Miguel. Thank you again, and sure, I'm very excited and hopeful that we'll have you soon here in Dubai. And please stay safe, and thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.